The Essential Education projector range from Hitachi sponsors ICT programs.
Teaching secondary PSHE and sex education in particular is hard enough without worrying about the quality of your resources. Well, today on a Resource Review ICT special, we're looking at 3 that might help you out. They are software containing an interactive storyboard and quizzes, a CD Rom that looks at sex and relationships from a teenage perspective, and a website of pupil assignments. Recommending today's resources, we have Kay Lord. Kay is a freelance education consultant who specialises in PSHE. On the panel today is Alan Mills from the Specialist Schools and Academies Trust, and Sally Carrington. Sally is Head of Social Science at Shoebury-Ness High School in Essex and has been trialling the resources for us in her lessons. Now, over in the test lab, Matthew Tosh, our resident ICT investigator, will be putting the resources through their paces. Well, Kay, your first choice of resource for us today is Cartouche Sex and Relationships. Tell us about this resource and why you chose it.
I chose this one because it uses storyboard format, which I think allows a lot of flexibility for teachers. It's also Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, so teachers can then be very discerning about which particular aspect they use. It's got 5 units, each covering different topics. The first one deals with the relationships, which I think is an area that's often overlooked. And then it goes on and covers aspects about contraception and also about safer sex, which fits very well with the teenage pregnancy strategy and the need to teach young people about HIV and AIDS.
OK, well, before we go any further, let's go over to Matthew in the test lab to see what he made of Cartouche Sex and Relationships.
Cartouche Sex and Relationships contains 5 complete study units, allowing pupils to interact with presentations or storyboards. You can see at the top of the screen here we've got the objectives and the learning outcomes, and if I scroll down we get to our first storyboard about infections, which is the one we're going to have a look at. So here's our main screen here, and the idea of this activity is that children get rid of the phrases they think don't apply. So for herpes here we could get rid of via the air, and we just click on it and drag it to this little trash can. At the top of the screen we've got our main storyboard in order, and some of the activities on here ask children to put things into the right order or indeed create their own storyboards from scratch, and this is what I want to show you now. On the right hand side of the screen is where we can add different backgrounds and characters, so we'll do the backgrounds first, and the same for the person if you want to put those into the picture. Click and drag Dave into the picture here. Now if I right click on the character, this brings up a little menu where I can control the position and pose of the person, so we can have a look at some different poses there, and also the size, so it looks a bit more realistic. Using these buttons down here I can add thought bubbles or dialogue or even text boxes. And the process continues until you've completed your entire storyboard. Now you also have the option of including audio dialogue to add an extra dimension of creativity, if you like. And some of the examples on the CD-ROM come with sound. Now there's plenty more you can do with this resource, including changing the transition timings and the transition effects. There's even a teacher support CD-ROM. There's lots to keep teachers and pupils busy on here. And on that note, I'll hand you back to Hermione.
Kay, are you concerned at all that the technique of this resource will detract from the content?
I think there might be a potential for that to happen. The teacher always is in the role as the facilitator. She's trying to enhance the learning, and he or she will have very clear learning outcomes for the end of each lesson. And I think it's about steering and really controlling in a way that allows the young people to think and develop their own ideas, but at the same time to keep them on task.
Sally, what do you think?
It is actually a fun package. The children really did like it. I used it with a Year 8 group, mixed ability group. It's quite interesting actually. I've got on the screen one of the storyboards that a Year 8 girl produced, and she was doing quite well with it. But what I had to keep referring her to was going back and doing the boxes, because when I looked over her shoulder, she had gone on to a number of her scenes. and there were blank boxes below, which was really the whole point of doing the storyboard.
So teacher input there was critical.
Vital, without a doubt. And also just the language that they needed to be able to use. Obsessional comes up, coercive comes up, and if they haven't got a handle on those kind of terms, then they're not going to set up a storyboard that actually shows that in any detail.
Okay. Alan, what are your thoughts?
I think cartouche is absolutely wonderful. It's used across the curriculum in lots of different areas and it's fantastic. I do think in a way I agree with both of you though, this is in some ways ICT taking the lead, and I wasn't too happy with some of the ways it evolved. The ICT became too important and the actual discussion of relationships could easily have taken second place.
The unit is actually set up for the students to be able to read through and work for themselves.
Right.
And that brings out that point exactly, that you could almost be tempted to put it in front of the students and let it roll and let them dip in and out of it without the importance of the learning.
I take those points on board, and I think any resource has got to be part of a planned programme, and it all needs some kind of discussion beforehand, setting the scene, understanding the key aspects and the words, the vocabulary.
Yes.
So it's got to fit with where the young people are.
Well, thanks everybody. Now let's move on to Kay's second choice resource, and it's the Sense Interactive CD Rom. Kay, explain this one to us.
What I like about it is it focuses on the Key Stage 4 student, and it doesn't beat about the bush. It goes into same-sex relationships. It talks about sexual fantasies. It really deals with visits to a clinic through a virtual clinic. So it's giving those young people the confidence and the knowledge so that they can go out and deal with the issues that may be facing some of them in today's world. We're back to the issue of how you use it. And I think it's really important that it is fed. It is fed with pre-discussion work facilitated by the teacher.
Well, thank you, Kay. Now let's go back over to the test lab to see what Matthew made of Sense Interactive CD-ROM.
This resource is based around the lives of 9 fictitious young characters, each with their own stories and experiences to tell. Now, if we go into the main menu, you can see that the resource is split up into 6 main areas. I'm just going to click on the one here, Sexuality and Sexual Feelings, and to select the sections you have to use the buttons on the left-hand side.
I am the fly on the wall, and oh man, could I tell you some juicy stories.
The fly on the wall takes you through each of the areas, eavesdropping on the conversations that our young people will have. And if you look at the screen here, we've got 3 possible conversations to have a look at. So we'll have a look at these 2 guys here.
Ah, yes. I've been keeping my large compound eyes on these 2. They both like each other. Both of them are nervous about making the first move. It looks like they need something to break the ice. Let's eavesdrop for a while.
Great party. Having a good time?
Yeah, brilliant. How about you?
Yeah, really enjoying myself.
It's not just conversations and presentations on here. There's also a true or false quiz. It's a fairly straightforward thing to do. They're asked true or false questions on things that they've learnt looking at the resource. So we can click on the true button here, and the programme gives you instant feedback. Now, a great little thing is this information button down here on the left-hand side. There are telephone numbers and website details. Now, no sex education resource would be without its glossary of terms, and you can get to this by using the buzzwords button at the top, and you can cycle through the words, and clicking on one gives you the definition. That completes our quick tour. I'll hand you back to Hermione.
Well, Sally, what did you make of the Sense Interactive CD-ROM?
It's quite good support for something that should have been delivered, hopefully, in the classroom, interactively, through discussions and things like that. I quite like the emphasis in some ways on the literacy skills, although the less able readers had some problems with some of the texts. For instance, the one that really caught them out is in the sex section. You can just see from that there is high level of difficulty with understanding that.
I think we're back here to the role of the teacher in the classroom. And when the pupils are doing interactive group work or even working alone, the teacher is facilitating the learning by going around and supporting. And for your less able, words like experienced and vulnerable, they may have some small understanding which the teacher can elaborate on and draw out from them.
Well, let's see what Alan thinks.
I think the interaction is poor, and the way in which the text and everything in it looks very, very old-fashioned. And I think that sums up what I think the programme's faults are. It seems very unreal. I found the cartoon sort of paste over on the active scenes difficult to come to terms with, and I found some of the scenarios when they were acted out cringe-making. It's very unreal. For something which is about real relationships, I think the ICT lets it down badly.
Yeah, but it does depersonalise it. I think the use of the comic people actually takes the child out of the equation and lets them feel more comfortable with it. I actually quite enjoyed the fact that they mixed and matched the comic with the reality.
Okay, well now let's move on to Kay's third choice of resource, and this is an interactive website from the Chalkface project called Formative Assessment in PSHE. Kay, explain this one to us.
Right, this is an attempt to look at assessment for learning in order to help the teachers understand where the young people may be in their learning about sex and relationships. I think it's particularly useful as a baseline activity, so you have an understanding of the starting point. It's also useful after a series of lessons or a topic that you can check out where the young people have got to. It's got assessments covering a whole range of areas, and this one picks up on sex and the law, so the issues of age of consent, etc. is here. But here you can see what the teacher might be presented with. And I think it's also important to remember that QCA have developed end of key stage statements for PSHE, and Ofsted are expecting teachers to use these. So again, it could be a source of evidence that would enable you to make those judgments.
Well, Sally, did you find this useful?
I would agree with Kay that it would be quite good for baseline data to know where you're picking the students up from in terms of knowledge. They're quite short, the actual things they have to do the test, so they'd work quite nicely as plenaries or something like that at the end of a lesson or at the end of a unit. And you could even actually put it in as a homework task as well, which would be quite effective.
Quick comment from you, Alan, on this one?
I think it's going to be very useful. Whether or not the good PSHE teacher is going to actually use it is the question, but I think it is there and it is free, and it's something that gives you an opportunity to report to Ofsted, report to your governors, and you may be asked to do that.
Okay, well thank you all very much. That's all we've got time for today, but just to recap, the three resources that we've looked at are Cartouche, Sex and Relationships from Immersive Education Limited, Sense Interactive, Sex and Relationships from Sense Interactive CDs Limited, and Formative Assessment in PSHE, Sex, Drugs, Alcohol and Tobacco from the Chalkface Project Limited. For more information about the resources we've featured today, go to our website, it's teachers.tv/resource review, or email us resourcereview@teachers.tv. So a very big thank you to our panel, to Kay, to Sally and to Alan. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on Resource Review. Bye-bye.
Essential education projectors from Hitachi sponsor ICT programs.